Every time I sit down at my wooden kitchen table, look at a clean plate, and pick up a fork, my forearms lock up. My hands stiffen. My mind yanks me straight back to a humid Tuesday afternoon years ago, standing right in front of the sink, listening to the voice of a man I trusted like a brother. He didn't just give me a piece of friendly advice. He didn't just tell me to be careful. He looked me straight in the eyes with a dead, hollow stare, pointed a calloused finger at what I was about to put into my body, and muttered words that felt like an iron nail driven into the floorboard. If you eat that, you will be gone soon. He said it with the kind of absolute terrifying certainty that makes a man's blood run cold. It wasn't a warning. It felt like a sentence. He stood there, breathing heavily, completely convinced he was looking at a dead man walking. But look at the reality today. I am the one still standing here. I am the one whose lungs still draw breath, whose boots still hit the gravel every morning, and who is telling you this story. I am alive. But he is gone, and the most brutal, agonizing part of this reality is that almost all of his children are gone too. A house that used to shake with the noise of a big family is now a hollow shell of rotting wood and overgrown weeds down the road. It is a haunting, heavy truth that I have to carry on my shoulders every single day. It makes a man question everything he thinks he knows about survival, about protection, and about the sheer, unpredictable brutality of fate. To understand how a man survives a curse while the one who uttered it perishes, you have to understand the rhythm we used to have. Before the darkness dragged his family under, my life was built on a strict, unyielding daily routine. I have always believed that a man is defined by his habits, by the discipline he keeps when nobody else is watching. If you don't control your morning, you let the world control your day, and I refuse to let the world dictate my pace. My eyes open every single morning at exactly 6 a.m. I don't need an alarm clock. My body just knows the time. The house is always freezing at that hour, the air thick and quiet, undisturbed by the chaos of the daytime. The first thing my boots hit is the cold hardwood floor. I walk straight down to the kitchen, light the gas stove with a match, and brew a pot of coffee, black, strong enough to wake the dead. No sugar, no nonsense. While the water heats, I listen to the house creak as it settles, a familiar sound that lets me know everything is exactly where it should be. I used to live for that early morning silence. I would take my mug, walk out onto the back porch, and stand there leaning against the wooden railing, watching the gray fog lift off the grass as the sun cracked open the horizon. It was a peaceful, predictable existence. You do your morning work, you maintain your property, you look after your own, and you live with the quiet confidence that tomorrow will bring the exact same duties. There is a profound dignity in manual labor and keeping your small piece of the earth in perfect order. I would spend the next hour checking the perimeter, ensuring the fences were secure, and making sure the tools in the shed were oiled and sharp. A man who doesn't respect his tools doesn't respect his livelihood. By the time 8 a.m. rolled around, the sun would be high enough to burn off the rest of the dew, and that's when the neighborhood would begin its daily awakening. I'd head back inside, fix a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, and eat it in silence, mentally mapping out the rest of the day's physical demands. There was no rush, no frantic panic, just a steady, methodical approach to existence that I assumed everyone else on our road shared. My friend lived 2 doors down, and our routines ran parallel like train tracks. By 8:30 a.m., I'd look out my front window and see him walking down his gravel driveway to grab the morning paper. He'd spot me near my truck or on the porch, raise his hand, and give me a sharp, respectful nod. He was a powerhouse of a man, deeply dedicated to his household, and he had a crew of kids that kept that property constantly moving. His yard was always filled with the sounds of boys throwing a football, dirt bikes revving up, and loud, chaotic life. My place was quiet, but his was an absolute kingdom of energy. Around 10 a.m., my routine took me down to the local market. I liked to walk it, about a mile down the blacktop road, to get fresh meat and vegetables for the day's meals. Often, He'd see me walking past his gate, jog down the driveway, and join me. We'd walk shoulder to shoulder, talking about real things, building projects, the cost of feed, fixing up old truck engines, and how to raise children right. We shared a fundamental belief that hard work and self-reliance were the only true currencies a man possessed in this world. He was a man of intense convictions. He had strong, unshakable opinions on how the world worked, how a man should protect his household, and the hidden dangers lurking in modern society. Sometimes his theories bordered on extreme paranoia. He would talk at length about the chemicals in municipal water, the hidden toxins in commercial building materials, and the ways modern manufacturing was slowly poisoning the population. I respected his grit and his desire to shield his family from harm, even if I didn't always buy into his fears. I thought he was just an intensely protective father doing what he thought was right. I had no idea that his fierce protectiveness was actually a symptom of a deep, underlying dread that would eventually consume his entire life. Our walks back from the market were usually slower, weighed down by the heavy canvas bags of supplies and the weight of our conversations. We would part ways at his gate around 11:30 a.m., each returning to our respective properties to handle the afternoon chores. For me, that meant splitting firewood, clearing brush, or working on the suspension of my old pickup truck. It was honest, exhausting work, the kind that makes your muscles ache in a good way and guarantees a deep, dreamless sleep at night. The afternoon of the incident started out completely ordinary. It was a Tuesday, the air thick with midsummer humidity that made your shirt stick to your back the moment you stepped away from the shade. I had walked down to the market alone because he was busy working on the engine of his old John Deere tractor. I was looking for something specific that day, a traditional heavy meal that my grandfather used to make when I was just a boy working the fields with him. It involved a specific cut of organ meat and a combination of rich, old-school spices and ingredients that most modern people avoid because they think it's too heavy, too high in cholesterol, or simply outdated. To me, it was comfort food, a connection to the men who came before me, men who worked 14-hour days in the sun and lived well into their 80s on a diet of pure lard, beef, and potatoes. By 1:30 p.m., I was back in my kitchen, working the stove. The skillet was searing hot, the kitchen was filled with a thick, savory smoke, and I was just transferring the food onto a heavy ceramic plate. The smell was rich and nostalgic, filling the small room and drifting out through the open windows into the heavy afternoon air. Right as I set the plate down on the table, the screen door clicked open. He walked right in without knocking, which was standard practice between us. We didn't believe in formal pleasantries or locking doors during the day. If you were a friend, you were welcome to walk through the threshold. He had black engine grease smeared across his hands and forearms from the tractor work and was about to ask me if he could borrow a specific size of socket wrench from my toolbox. But the moment he stepped up to the kitchen counter and saw the meal I had prepared, the words completely died in his throat. I turned around, expecting a casual greeting, but instead, I watched the blood drain right out of his face. He went gray, like ash, his eyes widening as if he had just walked into a room with a venomous snake coiled on the counter. He didn't shout. He didn't make a scene or throw his hands up in the air. Instead, he stepped directly into my personal space, closing the distance between us until I could smell the metallic scent of engine oil and sweat radiating off his clothes. He grabbed my forearm with a grip like a vice, his calloused fingers digging deep into my muscle. His voice dropped into a low, terrifyingly intense whisper that cut straight through the hum of the refrigerator. He pointed his free hand right at the steaming plate of food. He told me that eating that specific cut of meat, prepared that way, was a fast track to the graveyard. He claimed he had deep insider knowledge, articles he had read, studies he had uncovered about what that specific meal did to a man's cardiovascular system, calling it a slow-acting poison disguised as comfort food. He looked me dead in the eye, his pupils dilated with genuine terror, and said, "If you eat that, you will be gone soon. Mark my words, Your heart won't take it. You won't see the end of the year if you put that garbage in your body." The sheer panic in his eyes was completely genuine. He wasn't trying to scare me for fun, and he wasn't playing some elaborate joke. He was looking at me the exact way you look at a man standing blindly on the edge of a cliff. He truly believed that the simple act of eating my grandfather's recipe was an act of suicide. He let go of my arm with a sudden jerk, turned around without another word, and walked out, slamming the heavy wooden screen door hard behind him. I stood there completely alone in the middle of the quiet kitchen, the smoke still rising from the plate, his words hanging in the air like concrete dust after a cave-in. The house felt suddenly colder, the silence heavier than it had been just moments before. A man cannot let fear dictate his life, and he certainly cannot let another man's panic dictate what he chooses to put on his own dinner table. If you start changing your life because someone else is afraid, you've already handed over your freedom. I stood there for 5 long minutes, staring down at the food while it slowly lost its heat, the grease starting to coagulate around the edges of the ceramic plate. His words echoed in my ears over and over again. "You will be gone soon." It was a heavy thing to hear from a man you respected, but logic, hunger, and a stubborn, deep-seated refusal to be intimidated by a shadow won out. I pulled out the heavy wooden chair, sat down, picked up my fork, and I ate every single bite on that plate until it was completely clean. I won't lie, every swallow felt heavy, as if I were consuming the anxiety he had left behind in the room. For the rest of that afternoon, my mind played cruel tricks on me. I sat out on the back porch, attempting to read a mechanical manual, but my eyes kept drifting to my watch. I checked my pulse every 15 minutes, half expecting my chest to tighten up, my left arm to go numb, or my body to collapse right there on the wooden boards. But 3 p.m. came, and my pulse remained steady and strong. 6 p.m. arrived. The sun began its long, slow dip below the tree line, and I felt just as powerful and healthy as I did when I woke up that morning. I washed the plate in the sink, scrubbing away the last remnants of the meal, and went through the rest of my evening routine without a single hitch. I checked the oil in the truck, locked up the tool sheds, and went to sleep at my usual time. When my eyes opened the next morning at 6 a.m. sharp, the sun was hitting the window, my heart was pumping perfectly, and I felt completely fine. Weeks rolled into months. I kept up my strict routine. I kept eating the traditional foods I chose to eat. I kept working my land, and I stayed healthy and whole. I began to look back on that Tuesday afternoon as just a bizarre, isolated moment of temporary insanity from a neighbor who had spent far too much time reading conspiracy theories in the dark. But while my life remained steady, predictable, and strong, a dark, suffocating fog was quietly settling over the house 2 doors down. It didn't happen overnight, and there was no grand explosion of tragedy. Instead, the change happened slowly at first, the way a house's foundation settles into rotten soil before the walls begin to crack, and then it accelerated with a terrifying, unstoppable speed. The 8:30 a.m. waves at the end of the gravel driveway stopped completely. I would look out, coffee mug in hand, and the driveway would be empty, the morning paper left sitting in the bushes until the rain turned it to pulp. He no longer walked down to meet me for our morning trips to the market. The front yard, which used to be an absolute kingdom of noise, littered with bicycles, tools, and footballs, became completely deserted. The grass began to grow high, wild, and untamed around the porch steps, swallowing up the toys left behind. A grim, heavy silence took over their property. One by one, his children were struck down by a sudden, aggressive, and inexplicable medical crisis, a rare, genetic anomaly that local doctors and specialists from the city completely failed to understand or treat. It was an internal betrayal of their own bodies, a silent enemy that bypassed every external protection my friend had spent his life building. I would stand on my porch during the quiet afternoons, watching their house with a heavy heart. Instead of children playing, my view was replaced by the sight of flashing emergency lights cutting through the rural dark, the deep rumble of ambulances backing up into his driveway, and men in medical scrubs carrying heavy stretchers out the front door. The whole routine of our road shifted from a peaceful rural community into a living nightmare. It was brutal to watch. A man prides himself on being able to protect his neighbors, to stand as a wall against trouble. But there was absolutely nothing I could do but watch from a distance as his world crumbled. The devastation was absolute, the kind of sorrow that leaves an permanent stain on the land itself. Most of his children passed away within a devastatingly short window of time, leaving a massive, echoing void in that house that could never be filled by time or memory. The loss broke my friend completely. The strong, proud, opinionated man who used to command his land, the man who walked shoulder to shoulder with me boasting about self-reliance, vanished into thin air. He became a ghost inhabiting his own home. He stopped maintaining the property entirely. The roof began to leak, the paint peeled off the siding in giant sheets, and the fences he had built with his own hands began to lean and rot. I'd see him sometimes in the dead of night, a solitary broken silhouette standing by the living room window, staring out into the dark, empty yard where his children used to run and laugh. He had spent so much energy trying to predict hidden dangers, worrying about phantom poisons in food, and trying to control every microscopic variable of human existence. Yet he was completely defenseless when the real storm breached his own roof. He had built a fortress against the world, but the enemy was already inside the walls, carried in the very bloodline he sought to protect. Within a year of the last child's passing, the grief finished the job. His spirit had died long before his body did, but eventually, his heart simply gave out from the sheer weight of the emptiness. He joined them in the local cemetery, leaving the property completely abandoned, a monument to a family that used to be. Now, my daily routine carries a massive, quiet weight that I bear every single morning. When 6 a.m. hits, I still wake up without an alarm. I still walk down the steps, brew my black coffee, and walk out onto the back porch to watch the sun rise over the valley. But my gaze always lands on that dark, empty house 2 doors down, the windows now broken, the driveway covered in weeds. Surviving a curse while the man who spoke it falls beside you changes the way you look at the entire world. It strips away the illusion that we are in total control of our lives. It reminds you that a man can prepare all he wants. He can hide from every perceived threat, but he cannot micromanage fate. You can live your life trapped in absolute fear of the unknown, guarding against every imagined threat on your plate, or you can face the world with your head up, live by your own rules, eat what gives you strength, and accept whatever destiny comes your way with dignity. I keep my routine tight. I keep my feet planted firmly on the gravel, and I respect every single day I am given to breathe this air, because I know exactly how fast the silence can take over a man's life, and I refuse to spend my remaining time hiding from the dark.